Hello, this is Faith at Catholic Unschooling Coach, and I apologize if you can hear that kind of droning motor noise in the background. Where I live, it is so noisy. If it isn't a leaf blower or a lawnmower or construction, it's some other weird thing. They're doing something at the pond in the neighborhood behind our backyard. Anyway, I really can't stand the noise level. But I wanted to talk about unschooling and learning disabilities because I got this question from someone, and my kids had learning disabilities. They were kind of an alphabet soup, and we discovered more as they got older. But the first thing that I had to deal with was dyslexia. They had trouble learning to read, and this was quite an emotional journey for me because I learned to read naturally myself as a child so my birthday is in April and I went to kindergarten in September, and that summer my older sister, who's about 5 years older than me, and I played school, and and she had absorbed all the phonics rules, and so she taught them to me. We had these old readers, secondhand readers, and that's what we played school, and I learned to read. So I was taught by a 9-year-old, and the minute I got it, I almost feel like I remember the minute I realized that if you knew the sounds and you put them together, it suddenly became a word, and you could read. You could get what was said off the page, and I was an avid reader from the get-go. So I thought that was going to happen with my oldest child, who's now 30. She knew her letters from the age of 2. Those are my chickens too. And then I also have people walking. There's a path behind my house. I think people are walking on that. Anyway, there's a lot of ambient noise here. Oh dear. I don't know if this is going to work, if this recording is going to come out. But anyway, so my daughter knew her letters from age 2. It's just a little after 7 right now. This is how much noise there is in this neighborhood. Anyway, she knew her letters from age 2, and I thought that she would learn early, and she just couldn't. She just couldn't put it together. Even though she knew all the elements, she knew the sounds the letters made, and it seemed like she should be able to learn, but she just couldn't. Well, it turned out to be her eyes. Her eyes had trouble working together, and they fatigued very, very quickly. And I would notice that when she was trying to read, her eyes would start to water. They would get red, and she couldn't stay on a line. And I remember one time when she was maybe 4, we were driving, and she said, "Mom, the letters on that sign just jumped." And I didn't understand what she was saying. It was such an odd thing to say. But that's truly how she was seeing things. And then 19 months younger than her was my oldest son. And he was different. He obviously was hyperactive, but he was 5. I'd been doing parenting just the same way with him. He'd gone to the same preschool that my daughter did, and yet he didn't know his colors yet. He was 5. He didn't know his colors. He didn't know his letters. And no matter how many times I pointed it out to him or tried to show him or teach him, he just didn't get it. It just didn't sink in. So I knew something was up. And as I said before, the very first book I read on homeschooling was Nancy Wallace's Better Than School. And so my introduction to homeschooling was unschooling. And I loved the idea because in spite of the fact that my kids had this quirky thing with reading, they knew so much. I mean, their vocabularies were very accelerated. They had they were very good at grasping complex concepts easily. They had incredible imaginations. They were interested in everything. There was just a vibrant, sense of exploring the world, and it was quite delightful. And I could see that they were really smart, but they were having trouble with reading. So somehow, and I can't even remember how it was, because this was way back at the beginning of social media. Like there were bulletin boards instead of, I don't know, this was before Well-Trained Mind. This was almost before Yahoo groups. Maybe Yahoo groups were just starting. I don't know how I found this group, but I found a group of unschoolers, and it actually was, I don't know if it was started by Sandra Dodd, but Sandra Dodd was there. And she was the guru of unschooling at the time. And so here, that was kind of thrilling for me. Here I found out about unschooling, and Sandra Dodd herself was there. And I remember saying, you know, my kids really don't seem to be getting the reading thing, like there's something off. And I remember how I got scolded in a very snarky way by Sandra Dodd, who basically said, learning disabilities are made up by schools. There's no such thing as learning disabilities. And if you just let your child learn on their own, they will eventually learn to read. So I was quite put off by that, quite hurt by it. It was, and basically she said, leave if you don't believe what I believe. She said, this is my, I'm the queen of unschooling, so if you don't agree with me, you need to get out. I mean, it was quite rude. And so I was quite turned off, and it felt very cultish to me. And so I didn't go back to unschooling for years, even though I was unschooling a lot. I was trying to do the more curriculum-based thing, and failing abysmally, and then winding up unschooling, which for me was always active. It was never a passive thing. It was always active, because I was always excited to be involved with my kids, or would watch from afar as they played together. I loved it when they were playing together beautifully, and I could see their imagination, how they were getting along. But back to reading. So at the same time that this was going on with Sandra Dodd, my sister had a baby, and it was her second son, and she noticed that he didn't stand up. You know how babies, when you stand them up on your lap, they'll put their feet down? It's so cute because they're these little babies, but they're trying to stand while you're holding them. But he didn't do that. He didn't stretch out his legs, and that kind of worried her. So she went to the doctor, and they determined that his Achilles tendons weren't developing right. They hadn't developed enough in the womb. So he, I don't know how many months old he was. He was a little baby. So they gave him physical therapy so that he could learn to stand. So you know how unschoolers will say stuff like, did you have to teach your child how to walk? Did you have to teach your child how to talk? I also had a child, my second son, that needed speech therapy. Yes, sometimes you have to have physical therapy in order to walk. And sometimes you have to have speech therapy in order to talk. So I thought, most people pick up stuff naturally, but there's lots and lots of things that can go wrong. We're very complex. Things can go wrong. Your brain doesn't always function optimally. You don't always develop correctly, or there can be all sorts of quirks. And so I rejected that unschooling premise that if you just get out of the way, your kids are just going to develop. Now, I don't think we should be hyper vigilant and fearful, and I think that's what they were trying to say, that a lot of this stuff is developmental and there's no reason to rush things. And also, I do think that our educational infrastructure ignores developmental not issues, but they ignore the regular, normal arc of development. Not every child is going to learn to read at 6, right? Some kids are naturally going to learn to read at 8 or something like that, or some are going to learn earlier, naturally. And it's just your developmental arc. It's like being proud of when your child loses their teeth, Some children lose their teeth early when they're 5. Our 5-year-old's already starting to lose his teeth. My kids didn't lose their teeth till much later. But that wasn't, that's just their developmental arc. And I think that when we say, oh, you have to be reading by 1st grade, or you have to be reading by kindergarten, because that's a sign of some sort of academic achievement, it's not really true. It's developmental, and we should respect the development of the child. And it can happen. Reading is a very complex process, and it can happen in a wide range of years. normally, and it's normal. It's not. But some kids do have processing issues. My kids had eye issues that I didn't know about. They could not track. Their eyes fatigued really quickly. They could not, their eyes did not go in and out of focus as quickly as they ought to. So they did have issues, and some of them it was just physical and they were okay with the processing, and some of them had processing issues, like my oldest son who could not remember what letters were. The shapes of letters just didn't come naturally to him, and it took quite a lot of hard work. So if it's okay for someone to go get speech therapy, and it's okay for someone like my sister to go get physical therapy for her baby so he can learn to stand up, then I think it's okay to go and get, reading therapy. My kids did eventually, a few years into the journey, start doing vision therapy, which really helped them a lot. But also I realized that no matter how much I read to them, and I had been reading to them so much, I read hours every day. I had been discussing letters. They did know their letters. Well, some of them did. Or they just couldn't get the letters, and I knew something was off there, that they should have been able to get. That I just needed to get more instructional. I had to be able to reach them because they had some sort of obstacle blocking their ability to read naturally. And so that's what I did. I said, you know what? Radical unschoolers, you can go jump in a lake. I know my children. And this is the thing that really bothered me about the radical unschoolers. They would say, oh, trust your child. So you're supposed to trust your child completely, that they will develop, that they will learn, that they will always do the right thing. But you have to second guess yourself, right? Because apparently we as parents are so conditioned by all the education that we've had that we can't think outside the box, and we can't ever de-school enough. But somehow unschoolers manage to do that, to think outside the box and come up with this other ideology. But we can't, so we shouldn't. So if you think your kids need help because they have learning disabilities, well, that's just you being wrong because you've been conditioned. So it undermines your own confidence in yourself, and you feel somehow you're being disloyal to something. But you're supposed to have complete trust in your child, even though you see things that are going on with your child's development that make you genuinely question. So that's too cultish, that kind of thinking. I'm someone who can also think out of the box, even though at the same time I might need to de-school and think of learn a different way of understanding how education happens, how learning happens. Yeah, okay, that's good, but I also know my child the best. And they also say that at the same time. They'll say, well, you know your child, you don't need to do tests because you know what your child knows and doesn't know. Well, if I know that, can't I notice things that are going awry and try to correct that? I just didn't like that attitude, which is why my faith, my Catholicism, was the thing that sort of saved me from that, because that's a kind of insanity there, I think. And it just didn't ring true with me at all. And I knew I needed to help my kids. I remember my son was, I think, 8, maybe just turned 8, and I was hanging out with a bunch of unschoolers. And I remember we went on some field trip at some sort of science thing, a museum. I can't remember exactly what it was. But I remember that there was a woman there, and she announced very loud. They were handing out worksheets for the kids to do, or some to take records and to take notes, the scientific method and all that. And she announced very loudly that her 12-year-old was dyslexic and couldn't read. I remember seeing the child just sort of, I felt sorry for that child. And I thought, oh my gosh, I do not want my children to be like that. I want them reading. Because you miss so much. Reading is the basis for so much learning. So I remember at that time I went back and I renewed my efforts to teach one-on-one. I tried many programs that didn't work. I tried Teach Your Child to Read in 100 Easy Lessons. The orthography, is that the right word? The orthography in that book is really hard for people with processing issues. So that just tears, complete failure. Gave up on that one. Then I got this thing that at the time was really being raved about, and it was, I can't remember the name of it, but it was all, the idea was that you were in a car race, and it was very busy, and it had all these different little plastic parts and all these things that were supposed to reward the child. You were going on this racetrack, and every time you did something, you went a little bit further, and you were trying to win this race, and you got these cheapo little plastic prizes, and the readers were awful. The art was really, really bad, and my son, even at age whatever he was, he hated the art. He's like, this is ugly, I don't want this. And so that was a colossal failure. Then I tried, what was the other, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name. I blanked these names out. There was one, a much more simplified method. And my oldest daughter had learned to read finally, but she plateaued. She sort of got the initial, and then that was it. She just didn't go any further. And so we'd gotten a reading tutor, and she used this program. It was like in this binder, oh, I can't remember. And it was almost too simplified, but it did get her reading. It did help, and I saw how the tutor was teaching her, so that gave me ideas of how to teach reading. Instead of relying on the curriculum, you know, you have to have the confidence that you know how to convey the knowledge. So that didn't work for my son either. Then I had taken along, we tried Reader Rabbit. That was like also a big thing, colossal failure. Then I just waited for a while because I kept hearing it's developmental, so just wait. And then when this woman loudly announced that her 12-year-old couldn't read at this field trip, I thought, no, I've got to try again. So we went back, and I did so much research, and I don't know how I stumbled on this, but I stumbled on this, which is not very well known. I know right now All About Reading is like the big thing that everyone uses, but this one, At Last, A Reading Method for Every Child by Mary Petchey. And what I loved about it was that she got you scripted lessons. So I had, so you knew exactly what to say for each lesson and how to present everything. And she now has her own readers, but at the time she had 2 different readers you could use, and I happen to already have these readers, the Pathway Publishers, and so my kids to learn to read with these books. And she said, and she had this chat place online, so you could send her messages and she would respond. I bought the program, and she said it's going to take 6 months. So that's what we did. It took us 6 months using hers, and I didn't even stick with it 100%. Like, once I got the idea for how to present the lessons, I didn't really look at the script, and I kind of modified it too to make it a little bit easier. And I've never been consistent in my life, so it's not like 5 days a week we always did, you know, a half-an-hour lesson or anything like that. It wasn't like that. But after 6 months, my son, it was 2 weeks before he turned 9, he came downstairs and said, Mom, I can read. But it wasn't this simple reader. It was Calvin and Hobbes. He was looking at a Calvin and Hobbes book, and he figured out how to read. He was reading like Tyrannosaurus Rex and those kinds of things. And from there, he just, and that's happened to all my kids. They read late, except for my oldest. She was different. But the 4 others, once they got reading, all about their 9th year. So he was 2 weeks before he turned 9. The next one was just a little bit, like a month after he turned 9. My youngest son had the most problems reading because he actually had real eye issues. He had, well, I won't go into it, but he had problems with his eyes. So he didn't learn to read until just before he turned 10. And then my daughter, I think she learned to read at some point after turning 9. She wasn't as late as but by that time I was really relaxed, and I thought, you know what, you can learn to read when you're 9, and it's fine. It does not affect you academically whatsoever. They were able to, that year, once they got it, once it clicked, they took off, and within a year they were up to grade level or beyond. So it was not a problem at all. So I hope that sound in the background hasn't been so bad. I mean, I hope that you've been able to hear me. I'll have to play this over and see if it's a good video. But so I just want to say that just my little anecdotal spiel on learning to read and learning disabilities. If you truly think your child has a learning disability, that something's awry, something's amiss, and it's not just your own anxiety or your desire for them to be, smarter, or at least, on supposed grade level and all that kind of stuff. If you really think there's something wrong, follow your instincts and work on it just like you would any other physical thing. Reading's a physical act. Your eyes and your brain need to work together. So it is a physical act, and you might need therapy. Your kids might need vision therapy. They might need special instruction to help them absorb and retain things. They might need, more hands-on tactile ways of learning it or whatever. And so that's okay. If you have, to me, unschooling isn't about just being passive and stepping back and saying, okay. No, it's a very active thing. And sometimes you do have to step in with lessons, and that's fine. Mothers are allowed to do that. Parents are allowed to do that. Step in. I mean, you would do it if your child wanted to learn to make a cake. You wouldn't just say, okay, go at it. You would tell them, you would give them instructions. With anything, you do that. So why not with things that happen to be academic? Why are they sort of sequestered aside and you're not allowed to be proactive or interfere or something with specific instruction? No, I think you can. To me, that's not doing school at home. It's being responsive to that individual child's needs, which is just fine. So anyway, that's it from me. Almost 22 minutes. So I'm sorry it's so long, but it's a meaty topic. There's a lot more I could say. So that's it from me for now, and happy learning, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.